Hello and welcome to my presentation on the vaping industry and some of the ethical concerns surrounding that industry. Today we'll be talking about the industry itself, some of the pro-vaping arguments, some of the anti-vaping arguments. Then we'll dive into the actual ethical considerations. I'll give a brief summary and then I'll take any questions you may have. On this and the following slide, I'll talk about a few facts concerning the industry itself. In 2018, the e-cigarette market was valued at about $11.5 billion. One of the more impressive numbers is the projected growth in this industry at 21.6% between 2019 and 2024. That's a rather large number. The four major product categories in this industry are cig-alikes, vaporizers, tea vaporizers, and vape mods. Currently, the products are promoted as a safer and less expensive alternative to tobacco, and the distribution channels are in tobacco shops, supermarkets, vape shops, and a lot of the markets moving towards online sales. Some of the growth drivers in this industry are tobacco awareness. People are becoming very much more aware of some of the dangers associated with tobacco use. Flavor innovation, which we'll cover a little bit deeper when we get into the ethics, and design innovation. They're trying to make more appealing products to appeal to a larger audience. Some of the trends, again, this industry is really trying to expand its sales, which we'll touch on again in the ethics portion. They're increasing their presence online and in social media marketing. As good as the industry is and projected to be, there is some restraint. There have been some dangerous malfunctions in the past. Um, there have been devices that have exploded due to battery problems, overheating of certain modules, and things of that nature. The liquid itself can be harmful if consumed. There have been stories of children that have taken lethal doses of the liquid itself. And then there's just a lack of information out there. So there's some apprehension that this industry is fairly new and there's not any really long-term studies to show just how much safer this product is than tobacco use over the long term. Full disclosure, I do have bias in this, in that I am anti-vaping and I am anti-smoking. But in my research, I did find that there were pro-vaping arguments to be made, and that is that vaping is a safer alternative for long-term smokers who can't quit. Um, and this is largely because there are fewer toxins and carcinogens in the vaping liquid than there are in tobacco. And one study even showed that that e-liquids are safer for people who suffer from mild to moderate asthma, and that there's also less of a chance of harmful second and third hand toxic material transfers for those that are concerned about vaping in public establishments. There's some evidence to suggest that the secondhand vaping might not be as harmful. There are actually several anti-vaping arguments. Top of my list is that it's highly addictive. These products still contain nicotine, and some believe that by using these products, it may have a gateway effect in that users may move on to using actual tobacco products, becoming alcohol dependent, or using drugs. There are also additives in these products that are considered to be harmful. Some of these are heavy metals. There are also carcinogens that pose a risk. Um, I have on here that it may cause body system damage. Um, we're talking nervous system damage, cardiovascular system damage, respiratory system damage. Um, it can cause tumors. Um, there's evidence to suggest that it may cause birth defects, um, stillbirth. Um, it also may interfere with healthy brain function, lung development during during the fetal development process, and childhood and adolescence. These products are poisonous when consumed in large quantities, and therefore there's also a risk to unintentional poisoning to children. I stated in the previous slide that these products might be a good alternative for long-term smokers who can't quit. The flip side of that is that there's no real evidence to suggest that these products can help you quit smoking. There's an increased risk when using this product alongside other tobacco products just because of the you're compounding the effects of the nicotine by taking in increased amounts. Because these products are so new, one of the risks is that there's really no long-term data on what the real health risks and safety risks may be. And there's also very little regulation as far as what ingredients these companies can put into these products. Lastly, as you can see by the picture, these products aren't always that safe. There's a risk of burns, explosions, and a lot of times this is due to faulty batteries or misuse of the product. Here's a brief list of some of the ethical considerations that were identified in an article I found, namely product safety. Just in the previous slide, we saw that there are some safety issues to consider. The efficacy for smoking cessation. We just don't know how good these products are at helping current smokers quit. So, is it going to be ethical to label these products as devices that can help in that process, or should they just be targeted as a smoking alternative rather than something that's going to help someone stop being dependent on nicotine altogether? Um, Use by non-smokers. The ethical issue here is: should in the business people be targeted in order to increase money when we know that there's an increased health risk associated with the use of these products? Sure, in the pro vaping argument, these products have some evidence of being less risky for current smokers. But when we look at it from a standpoint of a non-smoker, now you've increased your risk from just taking in no nicotine at all. Another ethical consideration is the use by children. Um, there's some marketing and advertising considerations that need to be done. Um, Use in public. There's already several laws around the country about the public use of tobacco. In many places, tobacco use has been banned in public areas to prevent the adverse effects of secondhand smoke. And then there's the issue of normalization of the smoking culture. Are the use of e-type cigarettes, vaping devices, going to make it normal for people to dive back into what used to be a normal thing with tobacco? And lastly, market ownership. I mean, I've put an asterisk next to use by children and marketing and advertising because of these are two issues that I wanted to get a little deeper into as far as the ethics. As I stated in the previous slide, I wanted to dive a little deeper into use by children as far in from the standpoint of ethics. And I think what we're looking at here, you see several of the products with youth-friendly flavors. I mean, I think I've heard there's pound cake flavors and bubblegum, chocolate, and you can run the gamut of flavors. And there's already been studies to show that by adding flavoring to tobacco products, the appeal to children is magnified. And if companies are going to add these flavors, they need to realize that they're potentially marketing their product to children, and that's a major ethical issue. From the child standpoint, there's also this false perception of safety. I can say that I've heard advertising on television talking about vaping safer than smoking because there's less carcinogens. Um, you, I've heard my own teenagers talk about this. It's safer than smoking, so what's the big deal? Um, just because it has been proven to be a little bit safer in the short term, the studies still aren't out there to show what the long term effects may be. And if were a non-smoker to begin with, you are exposing yourself to some level of risk, and children aren't really realizing this. I think businesses need to be really aware of the message they're sending. And then there's the potential for this to be a gateway to tobacco use. And I can't say that this is true or isn't true. There's just not enough study on it yet. But I can see how nicotine addiction, if you're unable to continue to get a hold of, e-liquids or whatever, and you're needing that fix, tobacco use is the next step. So when we look at youth and the use of e-cigarettes, I think there's room for government regulation, and I think there's room for business leaders to make decisions that can reduce the risk of exposing new smokers and children to these products. Marketing and advertising is really just an extension of the last ethical problem we discussed with the use for children. This extends into use by new smokers. We have to ask, what message would an advertising ban send? Many of us are familiar with years ago. You would see the Marlboro Man on TV, and those cigarette commercials are non-existent today on television. Um, an overall ban, if the government were to step in and ban advertising of these e-products some way, we have to ask, what kind of message would that send? Are we now saying that these products are equally as dangerous and on par with tobacco use? And would that impact be that now smokers, thinking that the product is just as dangerous, would continue to use their tobacco products rather than switching to something that may, in all likelihood, be somewhat less dangerous? Um, and you weigh that against, by banning it, are we keeping it out of the hands of children and non-smokers who would be exposed to a little bit more risk? Um, currently, currently, there's a lack of regulation preventing the marketing of non-smokers and children. And in 2014, the World Health Organization actually released a statement that encouraged governments to restrict promotion of these type of products. Um, and this specifically mentioned any kind of advertisement that targeted children and non-smokers and people that don't use any nicotine products at all. I personally would support this kind of regulation. The vaping industry is relatively new. Arguments can be made and have been made both for and against the use of products in this industry. The lack of long term studies means that there is much left to be learned. Ethical concerns do exist. Business and government need to weigh their decisions carefully. The big question is, will reduced risk to current tobacco users outweigh the desire to acquire new smokers and children who would be subject to at least some level of health risk associated with e cigarettes? At this time, I'll take any questions you may have.